Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast for CHSN with Charlie Roumeliotis. I am Pat Boyle. Hey, Charlie, how you doing?
What's going on? Uneventful game the other night against Vancouver.
Yeah,
nothing really happening.
Yeah, right. Sort of two similar games, I guess, in the sense of like the slow starts. The Hawks dropped 2 in a row at the United Center. Vancouver won 6-3 on Tuesday. Buffalo doubled up the Hawks on Saturday, 4-2. And once again, bad first period against Buffalo and a really sloppy start for the Hawks. 21 seconds in, first shift, you're already down 1-0 to Vancouver. This is a pattern we saw at times last year, Charlie. Slow starts.
Yeah, I felt like this start was a little bit more disappointing than the Buffalo game, given how much of an emphasis getting off to a good start was against Vancouver because of the game against Buffalo, where they fell into a 2-0 hole. And it was one of those things where it's like the second and third period, they battled back in the game. But if they could redo maybe the first 10 minutes of the Buffalo game, it's probably a different story, or at least the feeling of the game is different. And so for Vancouver to score 21 seconds into the game, and then it wasn't just that shift, it was the next few shifts after that where Peter Mrazek was dancing around in the crease because he was facing such high quality chances right out of the gate. So it was another disappointing start for the Blackhawks, and they weren't able to climb out of it this time because Vancouver is in that upper echelon of teams where you can't get behind 2-0 against a team like that. And of course, they got some bad breaks along the way, which we'll get to. But the emphasis of the strong start going into the game and them just giving up a goal on the first shift was not exactly how the Blackhawks envisioned that one going.
Yeah, Nick Foligno said Vancouver found their game very quickly right after they scored that first goal. And then Luke Richardson said that the Canucks, they won the stick, they won the puck, they won the positioning battles, especially in that first period and through large portions of the game. So much so that on Wednesday, Luke wanted the team to work on D-zone and neutral zone emphasis, and basically how they handle switches and handing off forwards when they're covering them in the D zone, right?
Yeah, especially when they're facing a speedy type team like Vancouver, where they even have guys like on their back end, Quinn Hughes, who can pinch in and cycle you to death in the offensive zone. When they are facing those teams that have a lot of speed type players, the sorting can get a little discombobulated in the D zone. So the Blackhawks, that was the emphasis at practice on Wednesday. Usually they'll start with some special teams beforehand or whatever. They didn't do any special teams. It was strictly, let's get our D zone figured out. And they also did some neutral zone stuff as well. Just, preventing how they can prevent teams from getting into the zone. And then once the opponent does get in the defensive zone, it's making sure that they have their sorting corrected.
Big message was sent on Tuesday. Philipp Kurashev was a healthy scratch. It's a big message for Kurashev, who's coming off a career year where he had, 53 points last year. Mm-hmm. And it was also a message, I think, to the rest of the team that you can be a top 6 forward, a guy who had probably one of the 3 best seasons of a forward on the Hawks last year. You can get off to I thought a pretty good start as a second line center that they didn't necessarily pencil in at the beginning of training camp, and send that message to the team. Like, if you can sit Kurashev with not a huge body of work that said that he was playing poorly, I think it was kind of a dual message, not only to Phil, but to the rest of the team, that accountability in year 3 of this rebuild is a real thing.
Yeah, this was definitely a macro level of a healthy scratch, and not conducive to just Philipp Kurashev, because it was a little bit of a surprising decision that coming off the Buffalo game, like it's not like Kurashev had stacked some poor performances in a row where it was a little alarming, where it's like, okay, maybe he needs a little bit of a reset. And I will come to Kurashev's defense from this aspect. His role has changed from last year. Last year, he was playing on the wing, on the top line with Connor Bedard, and he was on the first power play unit. He was getting 19 minutes of ice time. This year, going into training camp, the Hawks, nobody really sees control of that second line center role. Frank Nazar starting the year in Rockford. Andreas Athanasiou didn't take control of it either. So it was kind of Philipp Kurashev by default getting thrust in the second line center role. So the guy he played with by far the most last season in Connor Bedard, he's not starting with him. And now he's moving from the wing to the center. Ironically, by the way, he won 4 of 5 faceoffs against Buffalo. So it's not like he was poor in that department. And also, he's not on the first power play unit. He's been on the second. And I actually don't even know if he was on the second unit for the first part of the season, right?
He was
during training camp. So,
which I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I really didn't understand that.
Yeah. So in Kurashev's defense, this isn't like he's in the top line, first power play with Connor, and he's not producing. This is, hey, your situation has totally changed. You went from 19 minutes of ice time to now getting 15. That's a significant drop off. And now, you know, I was looking at the raw numbers, and it's like he has 1 goal, 0 assists, 8 shots on goal, and I think it was like a -6. And you look at that and you're like, oh, okay, he's not producing. The Hawks have hit the post 12 times this season, a lot. Kurashev has 2 of those. And so if both of those go his way, maybe we're looking at this from a different perspective. So I was a little surprised to see that the decision made. And it wasn't like Luke Richardson kind of dropped him in the lineup. He went from second line center to you're out. And to me, that's Luke Richardson saying, hey, he had a really good quote. And I underlined it here. Luke Richardson said, he's a guy to me that I've gotten used to counting on. He can't play like he did the last game for me to count on him like that. I think the like that is the underscore. Like, hey, top 6 guy, I'm counting you up to drive offense. And I can't put you in that role if you're going to play the way you did. And ironically, Pat, I was looking at the underlying numbers. When he was on the ice at even strength against Buffalo, his line only gave up 2 shot attempts total, and they had 11. They generated 11 shot attempts. The problem was those 11 shot attempts didn't really translate into scoring chances. So while they didn't give up a lot, Luke is probably saying, hey, I need you to drive offense because we can't let it be Connor and the Tavo show all the time. We need to get some second line scoring. And to your point, this was a macro view of Luke Richardson could not make those types of decisions last year where he's taking away ice time and benching guys because he literally didn't have any. Like Rem Pitlick at one point was on the power play and they scraped him from Pittsburgh because they needed a filler. And so now you're seeing Luke saying, hey, I'm going to hold guys accountable because I have the opportunity to. And Kurashev, I think, was the biggest kind of message this early in the season.
And I think everybody on that line was guilty that night. Taylor Hall self-admittedly said that he did not have his best performance against Buffalo, and Bertuzzi as well. So, like, I think he could have picked any of the 3. I think because the other 2 are veterans, I think, and the fact, like you said, he is a trusted player of Luke's. So for him to play the way he did was even more alarming to Luke from that perspective. So, and I thought, Taylor Hall responded with one of his better games against Vancouver. So, message was sent to him in that macro level because his line mate gets sat. Luke had a conversation with Taylor Hall, said I can be better, and he was against Vancouver. And we're seeing these messages already in the young season being sent, being delivered, and being acted upon. And I think Lukas Reichel is an example of that. Healthy scratch the first 4 games on that road trip. Comes back for the home opener, turns in his best performance in a while against Buffalo in a 4th line role when he only had 8 minutes of ice time. And then he's rewarded to being bumped up to the 2nd line against Vancouver. And I think we'll see him start there with Reichel and Taylor Hall against the Predators on Friday night, with Athanasiou being probably the odd man out.
Yeah, and after practice today on Wednesday, as we record this, Luke Richardson was having a conversation with Lukas Reichel, and it was a fairly lengthy, it was like a middle type conversation, probably almost like 4 to 5 minutes. And we asked Luke Richardson about it afterward, like, hey, what were you talking to Reichel about? And he was like, that was positive reinforcement. That was a positive conversation where sometimes you pull guys aside and you're kind of, showing them areas where they can be better. He was like, I was telling him areas that he's been good at. And so Luke was saying, just like how you want to tell guys, hey, this is some areas we need to focus on, you also want to give that positive reinforcement. So seems like Lukas Reichel has put together 2 solid performances in a row, given his minimal ice time. And hopefully the next game, he's in that 2nd line center role and he's able to take a little bit more control over, getting more ice time, being on the 2nd power play unit, and seeing what he can do with that opportunity.
Taylor Hall picked up his 700th career point. It was a great forecheck by the Hawks, a turnover, a quick release. That's something that Luke emphasized in his post-game comments. He feels too many times, and this is a collective issue, that forwards and D-men are dusting it off, their stick handling, and they're not shooting quick enough. That's something Taylor did, the quick release. I found it interesting when Kaylee Chelios talked to him between periods that he had no idea that it was his 700th career point. I don't know if I buy that, but okay, I'll play along. The other thing besides Taylor reaching that milestone was, Connor Bedard playing against the team he cheered for as a kid. He went into the game with 15 points in 15 games against Canadian teams. He had 2 assists against Van when they were at the United Center last December. He had 6 shots on goal on, Tuesday night, as we try to remember what day of the week it is. And we saw some frustration. What was your takeaways from what you saw from Connor against the Canucks?
It was that frustration was probably a combination of a lot of things. It was probably the officiating. It was because he did have that play where he touched the puck in the or it was right at the blue line, and then he carried the puck into the offensive zone, and he went, and the referee blew the whistle. This was after the controversial offside, so I didn't know if Connor was saying, how was that one offside, but the other one isn't. But Connor had quite a few looks, and I think he finished with 10 shot attempts in that game and 6 or 7 shots on goal. So he was generating chances. He also set up Nick Foligno right at the doorstep, and Foligno got robbed. So his line generated a lot of chances, and it was probably just frustration that none of those chances went in. And it kind of reminded me, that line, just looking at the underlying numbers, they generated a lot of chances, but they also gave up a lot of chances. And it reminded me a bit of when Alex DeBrincat, Dylan Strome, and Patrick Kane would be on a line together, where you just know it's going to be high risk, high reward. They're going to generate offense, but they're also going to give up a lot in their own end. That kind of resembled a game like that, where while they were driving offensive chances, they also gave up quite a bit. But on the contrary, the other 3 lines weren't generating a ton either. So it was kind of like, in that moment, you were going to live with the mistakes in your own end, because that was really the only line that was generating anything. But in the grand scheme of things, not concerned one bit. Connor has 1 goal, but Luke Richardson was saying today, he's like, well, he's also a point per game player still. So it's not like his overall production is down. So he's already on a better pace than he was last year in the point column. And I think over time, the goals are going to come because that is his forte, is scoring goals. And eventually once he does break through, it feels like the floodgates are going to open. It's going to be one of those games where it's like, oh, Connor has 4 goals in his last 3 games or 5 in his last 3. Like, that's just how great players are.
And look, I also think, and he says it's just another game. He said playing Vancouver, his hometown team, is bigger to his parents and friends and family, and his sister. Sister, by the way, works for the Canucks. Believe she's in the marketing department or sales department.
Yeah, I think it's like an internship.
Yeah. So, he won't say that the Vancouver game, it means more to him, but I think some of that reaction that we saw on Tuesday night is because of the team on the other side. I want to get into I had a conversation with him about the 3-on-3 games that he has in the summer in North Vancouver. We'll talk about that before we exit this podcast. But you brought up the bad officiating. Let's start with the 7 men on the ice on the Connor Garland goal. I don't know how you can miss that. Like it was so blatant, and there is an official behind the play that could easily survey the situation and see that, you give, there's like a 10-foot grace period of guys leaving the ice. They were 40 feet from the bench or more. I mean, it was mind-boggling. I don't know if that would have changed the outcome of the game since it was a 3-goal difference. But your thoughts on that, and then the Sherwood play that originally, when we all saw them challenge it, we're like, all right, to chalk it up to Matty Meacham and Gill. They're gonna get another one correct. And lo and behold, the goal was upheld.
Yeah. The too many men on the ice penalty first. It wasn't a situation where the 6th guy jumped in just a little bit early. It was screenshot, 7 guys on the ice, and neither of them are close to the bench. I mean, right. It was, it is as blatant as you. And to be fair, I guess the officials went to the Blackhawks afterwards and said, hey, we missed that. Like, so there are times, but I think the frustrating part about it is, and again, not to make any excuses, because at that point the Blackhawks fell into a 2-0 hole prior to all this happening. So it doesn't excuse the bad start. But when you're facing a team like Vancouver, you almost are hoping for a break. You like need luck to go on your side too against a really good team. And it was almost like they were trying to overcome a 2-goal deficit against a team that's clearly better than them, but also in their minds are probably like, man, we have to overcome some tough officiating as well. And it's almost like you have an us against the world mentality. And so, credit to the Blackhawks for trying to compartmentalize that. But it was, it's just too hard to overcome. And then, okay, the offside review. Pat, I want to loop you in here too, because we were on the broadcast. Troy Murray was like adamant that he was like, this is going to get overturned. And so in real time, we're like this, I don't know what. And then as time is going on, you're like, I feel
this
like
should be
this is a little more concerning.
Why is it taking so long? Yeah.
Right. Like and I was looking at, I thought it was looking at possession. Like I thought they were when the puck left the zone, I was wondering if they thought that Kiefer Sherwood got possession, but they were looking at the tag up. And so did you guys on the broadcast, or were you, I know you had Frank Saravalli too sitting on the set. Were you guys picking that up in real time, or were you guys as confused as we were?
Yeah, no, we didn't pick up the tag up portion of it, which turned out to be the most critical part of this whole thing until the goal was upheld. We had Frank Saravalli from Daily Faceoff on the set, and he was communicating with the Situation Room. And let's be honest, Situation Room had their hands full with all 32 teams, 16 games going. This was by far, if you looked at some of the bloggers who had access to the Situation Room for the Frozen Frenzy, this was the most difficult call of the night of the 16 games. What we didn't realize was, the puck does leave the zone, and as he touches it and it enters the zone again, Sherwood does touch up with his skate. And I mean, it's so fast. There's no way, I will just say this, there's no way Kiefer Sherwood intentionally did that. It just worked out in his favor that he was able to touch up with his left skate before he touched the puck again in the offensive zone. So by the letter of the law, they did get it right. Out of the gates, to me, it looked like a clear-cut offside. But when you factor in that he tagged up before he touched it again, and the fact that nobody else from Vancouver was in the zone, because we were focusing on that one part of the ice, we wanted to see, as you extend the blue line, to see if anybody else had gone over the blue line. It wasn't exactly like the Makar situation a couple years in the playoffs, but it was sort of similar to that.
For sure. Now, you mentioned it was NHL Frozen Frenzy night, so all 32 teams were in action. So it was chaotic, but it was a unique situation because credit to the NHL.com's Dan Rosen. He was behind the scenes in the situation room documenting what was going on. And he explained it beautifully in his blog. And there were four official or four higher executives that were making this call on the phone, or like they were in the room while the Blackhawks or the officials in Chicago were trying to make this call. It was Chris King, who was an executive vice president of hockey operations. He was the one directly talking to the referees. Rob Schick, who's a former on-ice official working in the room. Rod Pasma, Group VP of Hockey Operations. And then Colin Campbell also came in, who's a Senior Executive VP of Hockey Operations. And the two quotes that stuck out to me, it was one from Colin Campbell saying, quote, "I don't think he meant to do that," referring to Kiefer Sherwood tagging up. So that, I think that kind of threw everything off, that it's like, it wasn't like this blatant attempt by Kiefer Sherwood to go tag up. It just kind of happened in real time. And then Chris King said, quote, "It's a different one, but this is the right call." So I think they were all interpreting the rule the way it is written, but all four of them were like, man, this is a rare one. And even Colin Campbell saying, "I don't think he meant to do that." It's still technically by the book, I guess, the right call. Luke Richardson, it was funny. We asked him about whether he got a better understanding of the rule after. And he said, quote, "I get it, but I don't know. There is some wording we were trying to look up in the book. It might be a little gray in how we interpret it because a lot of it is very lawyer language in there." So, it's one of those things where, did they get it right by the definition of the rule? Probably. Can they maybe tweak the rule or modify the rule in some way? I don't know. That's way above my head because I don't know at what point, I have two frustrations with this, Pat, and one of them I know you share with me. The first one, the replay angles on TV that we get, again, this is not a broadcast issue. This is not CHSN. This is the NHL providing angles. I don't know why they withhold the blue line camera. We never got it at any point. And that was a crucial part. Could you imagine
in the NFL withholding the goal line camera? Like every time there's a question of whether the nose of the ball breaks the plane of the goal line, that we're only seeing behind the play, in front of the play, not a direct angle. We see it every single time. We've now see it from the pylon. We see it from the camera. We see it, every single time there's a situation in question. And here it is. The blue line is so important for, obviously, the offside call. And they withhold that from the audience only to show it to you when they reveal, like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't, it's very hockey. It's very NHL, somehow like protecting their secret and that they're going to make a decision about, and they're using it. And then they're going to give that video out, and you're still going to judge them and say, "Oh yeah, yep, they were absolutely right." Or I don't know that I don't see the white between the puck and the blue line. Like I don't get it.
I know. I don't get it either. It comes across as they're trying to protect their officials, but it's like everyone is weighing in on social media, and it's like if you're withholding that information, people will see the truth quicker. But they're almost like they're allowing everyone to create these judgments without seeing the actual camera that's going to make the call for us.
And we've done demos back at the previous network where when your skate is off the ice and the camera's at a certain angle, it can look like it's directly over the blue line when it's not directly over the blue line. So it's paramount that you get the camera angle right down the blue line from both sides of the ice. Like you said, in a technology-driven world that we're in, especially in TV, the fact that they withhold that only to release it 5 minutes later, I don't, honestly, explain to me, how's that protecting the official?
I don't know. I don't know.
And
in that situation specifically, it wouldn't have been valuable you can obviously clearly see that he's tagging up. In that moment, though, we're looking, is the puck is the puck still, is there any white spot between the blue line and the puck? Because if the puck is still on a stick or not on a stick, that's kind of determining, that's a huge factor in that. So I don't get it. The second gripe I have it was such a lengthy review, and then they come out and it's like the call on the ice is a good goal. And everyone in the arena is like, what's the explanation? Yeah. I mean, poor Troy Murray is texting higher up people saying, do you know what the explanation is? Because they're trying to communicate to the fans. Like, imagine, like you said, the NFL, if they just came out of a review and they said the call on the field is this. And it's like, there's no context into what they were looking at. And it just left fans just totally in the dark. There was no transparency in real time.
And so easily fixed. The official is mic'd up. You got an explanation from the situation room. Just repeat the explanation you got from the room and explain that it was a tag up, and we move on. Like it's just, again, why they're withholding camera angles and why they're withholding information only to give it out later no, give it out right there. You made the decision. We're not going back on it. It's not going to change. You gave it to the official to make the call at the United Center. Let the 20,000 people that paid and people watching at home and listening, give them the information that they want.
And it's funny too, Pat, because even today after practice, I was kind of bouncing around the locker room and saying, hey, do you have a better understanding of the rule now after? And they're all like Connor Bedard said today, he's like, in real time, he's like, I didn't know what the rule was. I don't know what was happening. He's like, I probably should know the rule, but apparently the ruling. And then there was one Blackhawks player that was saying, wait, that's why it was offside? I thought it was because it was possession. Like they were, the players were in the dark. So it was just, I wish they did a better job of kind of explaining it in real time to the fans because it wasn't some quick review that it's like, oh, yep, we get it. I mean,
let's be honest, it was a complicated review. I actually, I don't have as much, as long as you get to the right results, you can spend an extra couple minutes on it for me. Because I
totally agree.
My thing was give us the explanation. Don't just spend 5 minutes on it and wait for Dan Rosen's blog or Frank Saravalli to text his insider, and then that was nice to have that on the CHSN broadcast on Tuesday to have that kind of access and an insider that is able to do that. But let's be honest, they create more problems and headaches for themselves with the processes that they go through.
Right. And I'm all for, hey, if you need an extra minute to get it right, get it right. But for us, we're trying to communicate to the audience as well. Like we're on the broadcast and I'm thinking here, I'm trying to look at the possession, and it's like, I got home last night after doing the post-game show where I'm reading the blog. I'm reading what scouting the refs on, they had a really nice article breaking down why it was very rare, but it's the right call. It's like, oh, cool. I wish I would have known that when I did a 45-minute post-game show trying to explain to the fans. And now I sound dumb because I was looking at the possession the entire time. So it makes sense now, but in real time, now like it's irrelevant because everyone has moved on from the game. Now moving forward, we kind of know the rule, but in real time, fans are like, we want an answer. What was the call and why was it that call? So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now.
So I talked to Connor Bedard on Monday after practice, and the topic was the 3-on-3 competitions he has in the summer with other NHL players. And they play on a small rink in North Vancouver. Matt Barzal, Kent Johnson, I think Kent Johnson was the one who kind of came up with this. Alex Kerfoot, you got Crookshank, Sam Reinhart, Podkolzin, Jujhar Khaira has played in it, some other NHLers. And basically what happens is 10 guys show up on a Sunday and they play again on a small rink. And it's 5-a-side, 3-on-3 hockey, best of 7 format. And it's gotten so competitive that like on Tuesdays they have a draft. And so they draft their teams for the next Sunday. And these games can last like a short period of time, or they can go over 2 hours. And, Connor said like they're absolutely dog tired. The ice is in bad condition. But they're out there in the summer, taking that competitive nature that they have by trade and, working on staying in shape, but also taking their game to the next level. I said, what area does this help enhance the most? What areas do you take from the 3-on-3 games and it applied in the NHL? And he says, really everything. It could be edge work. It could be defense. It could be protecting the puck. It could be your moves, dangling, what have you. Like, again, it's what you want to get out of it. But I just thought it was another example of just the competitive nature, the love of the game that we both have discussed over the last couple of years, how to me, it only rivals that of Patrick Kane, at least the only player that I have seen talk about the game and then go to the lengths that they do to, remember Patrick played in that 3-on-3 during COVID at Fifth Third Arena that Kendall Coyne Schofield used to play in. And how he helped start the Darryl Belfry camp in Florida. Yeah. And just how he'd bring a teammate down to Florida to the Belfry camp every year that might be his line mate. So, this was just something that I thought was cool, heard about it. And it doesn't surprise me, when you hear the story and just hear him talk about it, how much he just loves this game.
Yeah, and it's funny too because when there's a 3-on-3 overtime situation with the Blackhawks, he's probably licking his chops because this is like second nature to him, where he's like, man, we practice this in the summer all the time, and he knows what he can and can't get away with because he's doing it with some other guys. It was Pat Maroon, I think, that said it as well. He plays inline in the summers. And he's like, that's an area where I can literally, I think inline is 4-on-4 typically, and might even be 3-on-3. I don't know for him, but he's like, that's where I can work on my handles, my hands. And so that's where I've developed some good hands, especially in tight. And I was like, you can see it. There have been a few plays this year where he's dangling for a big guy. You can see it in tight. So not surprised that Connor is one of those guys that does every little thing in the summer, one, because it's fun to him. It's not like he's putting in work for work. He's like, I just want to compete. But two, it's helping round out his game in some other way that will probably translate to the. It's kind of like how the Blackhawks play 2-puck after practice. It's like, how much does that help in the shootout? And you're like, oh, it actually does a little bit. So, maybe it's just some little tiny advantage that could help.
As we exit, let's update Artie Levshunov, activated yesterday and sent to Rockford. You spoke to him. He talked about the foot injury and how it happened in Florida, and he skated on it for a while before realizing how bad it was. When are we going to see Levshunov play for the Ice Hogs, and what do you think the timeline is?
Yeah, so he was on the ice today in Rockford. Their next game isn't until Saturday, so I'm not. That might be a too tight of a timeline, but we'll see. I mean, he's been skating for a while. He's been skating for weeks, and so I don't think this is going to be a situation where he needs ample time to get ramped up physically. I think because it's a foot injury, it's not really something that it's upper body where you need to kind of like, you need to kind of see how the contact feels, and you got to make sure, like, if you have some sort of upper body injury, that it feels okay. Because it's a foot injury, it feels like he's been skating for so long, and once it's cleared to go, I feel like he's going to return. So wouldn't be surprised if it's as early as this weekend, because I'm sure he's itching to get going too.
And then Laurent Brossoit, he's been on the ice. I know he and his wife are expecting a baby, so that's playing into this. Do we have any clarity on when he looks to be back at practice, and will he get an assignment in Rockford, or do you see him just trying to work his way in the NHL?
I think they'll probably just work his way into the NHL. The Hawks are about to go on a lengthy road trip starting in Dallas on Saturday, so I imagine he's gonna be on that trip. The good news is Brossoit joined the team for practice today, and so he was rotating in and out with Peter Mrazek. So that's kind of the next step in his progression, where it's not just resorting to doing his own stuff before practices. He did his stuff before practice and then joined the team for practice. So that's the next step in his recovery. It has been a little bit longer than expected because he was originally on a 5 to 7 week timetable, and he's in the 8th week right now. So again, you mentioned it. He has been expecting a child. I don't know if that has happened yet or not, but I think that might have played a role in delaying his return, and he's about to go on a long road trip. So maybe he wanted to make sure that he was around for it, but I would be surprised if he's not returning at some point on this road trip, because I don't think he needs a conditioning stint or anything.
I know Nashville got their first win last night. Do you expect Soderblom to go Friday against Nashville and Mrazek against the better team in Dallas on paper?
That's a good question. That's what they did in the Winnipeg. Was it Winnipeg Edmonton where they saved Mrazek for the second one? And so they could potentially do that too, where that the Hawks are going to, especially going from home to road, where they might want Peter Mrazek in there for the second game against a higher quality opponent, and because they know that the Hawks are going to maybe be a little tired. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the move.
Got any other tidbits or things you want to get off your chest?
I think I'm good. Yeah.
How are things going on WGN Radio?
It's going awesome. Troy's been amazing to work with. John, obviously, too. It's been super fun. I feel very much in the comfort zone now. And so, what about you guys? Getting into a rhythm?
Yeah, we're starting to find our rhythm. Kaylee was up in the booth filling in for Darren Pang last night. And we had Frank Saravalli and Chris Kunitz. Kunitz has been fantastic, bringing his wealth of knowledge of, winning 4 Stanley Cups. And Tony Granato has been amazing as well. So, yeah, we're starting to find our groove, and hopefully we'll get up to speed on this upcoming road trip.
All right, let's do it. I saw Tony Granato on NHL Network the other day. That guy, he's a hard worker. He's everywhere.
He's man in show business these days. That is going to do it for the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast for CHSN. For Charlie Roumeliotis and Pat Boyle, we'll catch you next time.